Good morning. Good morning. Today is the 28th, the last Monday of April. Oh, next Monday is Cinco de Mayo. Do you have any plans for not today, but next Monday?
Congratulations on your new baby. How's it being a dad? Second time around.
My body is definitely recovering faster. I feel good. I feel agile. I feel ready to go. All the hours of sitting on the couch in the labor unit. It's great. So I've come to realize that this child is maybe 10 times better than Adeline in terms of just like not craziness. So that's been a real cool thing their temperaments are very, very different. This one is very chill, very mellow, very obedient, very kind.
Like your wife.
Yep.
Adeline's like you.
No, Adeline she's a one of a kind, I think. But today, speaking of babies, I need to regroup.
You're losing your mind. Am I right? Are you right?
No.
Yeah. He says you're losing your mind.
I haven't been sleeping much, but I realize that's just a part of the gig. It is what it is. But today, speaking of babies and children and teenagers and adult children, we're talking about godly parents. And the reason why we didn't even do the introduction, you're listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang. We have with us Pastor Jean and Junsuk. And today, speaking of children, we're going to be talking about godly parents and what that even means. I think there has to be a distinction that's made between what we think are traditionally good parents and what the Bible shows us to be godly parents. I think sometimes we get those two confused. We want to be good parents, forgetting that we are called to be not only good, but godly, as according to the word. And I think a lot of times tradition would have you think of good parents in a certain way. But I thought today maybe we could have like a free flow conversation.
That means you didn't prepare any questions.
No. I have them. But what I meant is like, I guess always free flow. When is it not free flow? Mm-hmm. It's always like flowing freely, I guess. But today what I was thinking was I have a couple different Bible passages that I wanted to go over, and perhaps we could just talk about parenting in that sense. And I think if more questions come up, we can discuss those things as well. But just really on the basis of what it means to be a parent, a godly parent. What does that mean? And I thought I would read Proverbs chapter 22:6 to start us off. And it reads, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." And so we can see from the Bible that, there are many verses talking about a father and a mother training a child in the ways of the Lord. So what does it mean to be a godly parent? And how can we distinguish between a godly parent and a good parent? Not saying that those can't be the same, but how do we distinguish between the two?
Yeah, I thought I would, when you asked me to do this podcast, I thought I might go back a very, very slightly.
Oh, yeah.
And then
please.
Come back forward to where you are. So
Yes.
we first start with the doctrine of man, but what happened was in our modern scientific pursuit, we call it now anthropology. And from anthropology, there are several branches. And it became the study of man, but from anthropology, then we have ethnology. And from ethnology, we have other branches that would even come out, which are even smaller subsets of, let's say, society and civilization. Things like now we'll have like kin anthropology or kindred anthropology, where we want to see the relationship between parents and children and things like that. What I found interesting is that because we took God out of our anthropology, we don't call it the doctrine of man, we call it like anthropology and things like that. Even our now teaching of our young kids and babies. There's no God in there. So even when we're looking at the relationship between, let's say, father and son, or mother and daughter, or whatever the case is, if we take God out of it, and because we want to be scientific, that's why we have our modern day understanding of how education should work. And that's why teachers believe that a lot of these young, teachers that come out of their studies, they think that they know more than the parents because they studied education. They studied anthropology to a degree, a subset of anthropology. And so now they believe that they are more qualified to teach your child than you are as a parent.
Yeah.
And so now we have a surge of these young progressive liberals who are teachers who believe that they have every right to teach your child. And then we have the more old school people like yourself, who believe that the parents should be the ultimate teachers of their child. And that's why there's the separation. The separation happens, if I may reduce it ever so slightly, but I think this is a valid reduction. It's because we took God out of anthropology. We took God out of our understanding of who man is. Obviously, in anthropology, there's religion. You could talk about religion, but more and more in the West, we've taken religion out of anthropology. And so now, even when we're talking about students or kids or children, when we're relating to them, we relate to them as a subset of, let's say, Darwinism or some kind of evolutionary process that we think happened in the past. And so now when we're saying we want to raise our children in the ways of the Lord, or the nurture and admonition of the Lord, like we see in the Bible, people give a strong pushback, and you might be confused. Why? How can they be against that? How can they be against parents raising their kids? Or why would any parent have any right to, let's say, protest what teachers have decided what the material is going to be? Let's say I'm going to teach the LGBTQ agenda. I'm going to take like a math problem and say, Bob has 4 apples, and if he gives 2 apples to Sydney, how many does he have left? But let's talk. Why did Bob have 4 apples in the first place? Why did Sydney have none?
It's privilege.
And so they'll insert, let's say, not just a social construct to, let's say, simple math word problem, but they'll insert their biases and their understanding of the world, their worldview, into even, let's say, a simple math problem. And so if you object against that, that must mean that you are this unqualified, uneducated parent who's trying to, supersede the teachers, vast knowledge and their studies that they have, that because they have the qualifications to teach your kid and you don't. But I'll just end it there by saying that is not what God has prescribed in the Word. Clearly, He has not prescribed that. He has given the responsibility of the raising of children to the parents.
Would you say then, based on what you just shared, that taking God out of education is a bad thing?
He's losing his mind.
Why is that a question?
You're losing your mind.
I'm going somewhere.
Okay.
I'm going somewhere.
All right. Let's see where you're going to go.
Because if you're saying that taking God out of education is not a good thing, you're saying that public education is not a good thing. And if public education is not a good thing, then where do we go from there? Because if you're saying that God needs to be in education, then Christian education or homeschooling is the only way then for Christians. Because public school systems, right? Because if you think about it, and this is from the public education episode of Just Thinking, Pastor Virgil talks about the fact that school systems are really discipleship systems. And so if you're saying that taking God out of education is a bad thing for a Christian, or is just bad in general, then as a responsible Christian then, shouldn't you be seeking an education system that has God at the center of it?
Well, it's a great episode that they did. It's their most recent episode, from what I believe. And they really went into John Dewey and like putting him in the forefront of, let's say, how the public education system had been formed.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, when public education came to the forefront of people's minds and it came into our society, it was really so that people can have a universal kind of dissemination of this important information that people thought you needed to have growing up. So every kid needs to know the basics of, let's say, the English language, because the English language is what people speak. So you need to know these basics. You need to know the basics of arithmetic. You need to know some basics of science. So you would get taught these things in school. And if you don't have it, not only are you going to be not able to participate in society, but you would be a drag on society. So that's the spirit. But obviously, it was taken over very early in its stages, and it was taken over by another ideology which wanted to, possess our kids with a different worldview, which was antithetical to what we saw in the Bible.
Because I think the argument that people make is the public school system was always intended to make effective and good citizens of society. And so if you're going to do that, then ideologies will change because the world will change, and what is popular always changes, and what is the flavor of the day always changes. And because that is the case, that's why liberal ideology, leftist ideology can come in, because you want to make effective citizens that will affirm neutral genders, that will affirm same-sex marriages. And so that's why these things are going to the public school system, because we want to make effective citizens. But that is outright a different goal than a Christian education, which is to make faithful disciples of Jesus Christ. And so if that really is the case, and I'm glad we started it on this page because we're talking about education and the role of the parent within education, when a parent sends off their kid to school, you are relinquishing your responsibility for that time being for this kid to be educated, not only in academics, but really in a worldview. So that's the case.
You are asking someone to take your stead in teaching your child certain topics or certain subjects like math. You're not going to teach your kid 2 + 2. I get it. So you want your kindergarten teacher to teach your kid 2 + 2. And then when they come back, if you playing the good parent, you want to say, "Oh, what you learn in school? 2 + 2. What does 2 + 2 equal, Bob? Oh, it equals 4.
Bob.
Good job."
Yeah.
I don't know any kids named Bob, but so I use Bob. Otherwise, I should have used Nathan or Nate.
So the doctor that was delivering was like, "Oh, do you have a name for the baby?" I said, "Nathan." And he said, "Do you know what that means?" And I looked at him and I said, "Are you kidding me? Do you think I'm a fool?"
Yeah. What did he say after that?
He said, "L'chaim." It was a Jewish doctor. I guess that's the question, though.
You lost.
If Christians are sending off their kids, relinquishing their responsibility for the time being to a school system that is not only teaching academics, but is teaching a worldview, wouldn't it behoove the Christian then to send their child to a school system that is God-centered rather than sending them to a school system that is completely not only separating God from school, but going against God?
Yeah, I guess I just keep on having to go back. So what's the role of government? Is the role of government to teach and educate your children? And the answer is no. So why have we, come to a place in society where we think that the most obvious thing that we should do is send our kids to public school? It's so obvious that we should. Are you crazy? And I would like to go back to say that it's because we have developed a reward system where if you send your kid to public school and he or she does well, then he or she will, that reward system in society is set up so that he or she will do well. That's why Asian parents continue to say, make sure you do well. Do well in this class, make sure you excel in school, in your studies, because then the reward system is set up so that you will succeed in life. And if you succeed in life, then you can continue on, passing down your legacy, your wealth, and all of this good stuff, because the government now has the power to do so. So if you want to fight against that, what you're saying is, now I'm going to completely swim upstream And even when there is really no sure, let's say, crown at the end of it, like parents don't know. What if I hold my kid home and I try to teach my kid and the kid is a complete mess, a total failure? Not only that, social mess, because there are no kids. No kids. His friend is like he doesn't have any friends. Nobody has age.
He's a loser then.
Becomes a loser.
Oh, no.
So not just not just academically, but now he's socially a loser. So what are you going to do then? So parents have this immense pressure now put on them because the reward system, the system is set up so that you have to send your kid to school and your kid has to do well in the given environment that they're in.
Yeah.
This is how it's always been set up ever since even when we were kids. So you are not able to survive if you don't go to school, a public school, and you succeed in that system that has been placed. And so now, more recently, within the last, I don't know, maybe the last generation, more and more Christians have been sending their kids to a Christian school, a private education, or they've been homeschooling.
Yep.
This is a more of a recent phenomenon because in the 60s, people used to homeschool. Do you know what kind of people homeschooled people?
Christian people.
Non-Christians.
Non-Christian people is
right.
what I meant.
Leftist, socialist, communist, because they didn't want them to get educated in this free-thinking, capitalistic, worldview where you learn about laissez-faire and things like that. They didn't want that.
Yeah.
So they would a lot of these leftists would homeschool their kids. That kind of has flipped now, where the leftists are now teaching and our Christians are the ones pulling their kids out because you know what? They used to read the Bible in school. They used to pray in school. Even after they took prayer out in school, guess what they did? They still pledged allegiance to the flag at school.
Yeah.
Do you remember doing that in school? I pledge allegiance to the flag of
I
the
wasn't
United
even
States of
American at that
America.
point, but I still did it.
America, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And to the republic to which it stands, right? One nation under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. So that's what you would do every morning as you placed your hand on your heart and, address the flag. You would do that all throughout your public education system. Now, no one does that. Like, it's very rare when I hear someone, especially in, where we are in Jersey and New York, if a kid would do that in school. And so you see this slow, taking away from some of the ideals that we were supposed to have. And I get it. Some of this stuff might, push up against the Just Thinking podcast episode on the DOE. Is it the DOE or
No, it's just public education.
Public education, right. But I don't think it's necessarily antithetical. I'm just giving you another side of it, hopefully. So you can listen to that episode, you can listen to this, and hopefully it'll be good. And I don't disagree with anything that they said, to be honest. I really, really enjoyed that podcast. But what I would like to also say is that now people have been noticing, and I get it. People are like, it's too late. You notice late. No, it's not too late. If you still have a child that's under your care, it's not too late. That means you still have that responsibility of bringing it up. So going back to what you were really saying before, and then what I wanted to continue on from, is even if we look at the way the Bible has structured how kids should be educated, it's never by the government. It's never by the government.
Nope.
So who taught their kids in the Bible? If you look at the Shema, if you look at, Proverbs, if you look at even, the New Testament and how what Paul assumes, let's say in Ephesians chapter 6, right?
Yep.
He assumes that because he rightly makes this assumption. It's parents. Parents teach their kids. We do not delegate it to other people because we have to. We delegate. If we are to delegate it to someone else, you have to understand that the responsibility still ultimately lands on you as a parent to teach their kid. John Calvin will go as far as to say that the family is the little church. Let me get a little bit into that. Maybe you could respond if you like. He'll call it a little church. And there would be a mini minister, and that would be you. The dad would be the mini minister in this little church, because it's in this little church that you have to teach your kids the way of faith and how to live. That it happens in the home. And then you go to the big church, which is, the church that we attend here.
On Sundays.
Nowhere do we see in the Bible that the government had to provide for education.
No.
But now our tax dollars, our time and money, our stress, all these things are now being put because our system now has developed into a place where if you don't go to a public education, school, public, whatever, or go through the system, rather, I should say. If you don't go through the system, you will not be able to succeed in society. Who's going to do that? No one's going to do that. You want to purposefully ruin your kid and their future by not sending them to school.
Right.
So now we have these other options, which may not be as, let's say, as form-fitting as the public education option. But we have these other options. But I want to go back even further, go back even beyond, let's say, the public education podcast of the Just Thinking and say, that's how our whole system has been rigged. It's been put in place so that you have to go through the system to succeed in society.
Yeah.
You're not going to go to college. And then if I ask people, why are you going to college? Well, so I could get a job. So you can't get a job without going to college? Who made that rule? When did that start happening? Why do you have to go to college? I was with a bunch of my friends who happen to be pastors, and they were like, they're excited for their kids to go to college because that's the life stage that they're all in. They're excited for their kid to go to college, and we're talking about which colleges they're going to. And, I would say, sometimes I would say things like, well, I honestly don't care if my kid goes to college or not. And they looked at me like I was a crazy person. Like, I honestly don't care. The point is, why would I send my kid to college? For what reason? So that they could find their way in life. You're going to find your way in life when you're 18 to 22. What have you been doing for 18 years? So. For 18 years, what have you been doing? And no one taught you what you should be doing for the first 18 years of your life. And now all of a sudden for 4 years, you have to cram that down. It's basically 2 because you have to pick a major, right? So basically in 2 years, you have to find out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. No wonder kids are so stressed when they go to college and they're freshman and sophomore. They think they could play, so they play, but then it comes time for them to pick a major and they get so stressed.
Yeah, and they become like art history major or something.
Right.
Not saying that.
I didn't say it. I don't know who you're saying not saying because you literally just said it.
I took an art history class twice.
Yeah, that is a good question. Why twice? Well, let me reinforce that with what Calvin said in his Institutes. Or actually, it was on the commentaries of the 4 last books of Moses. And he wrote about the Shema in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7. And that, what he was mentioning was God impresses or commands that his laws be impressed on the hearts of children. Remember, children are malleable. We say things like they're like sponges. They soak up stuff. That's for a reason. And there's a reason why people are like, I don't want you to indoctrinate my children with your religion, because children are impressionable.
Oh, yeah.
But God is commanding his people, you impress upon children, your children, my laws. And but Calvin adds to that. He says you should do that not only by formal instruction, but by constant conversation. Now I'm quoting here, so that the knowledge of God may penetrate their souls from their earliest years. Parents must be diligent, not leaving this duty to others, but taking it upon themselves to ensure their children grow in the fear of the Lord.
Yeah.
The ultimate responsibility that parents have is not simple instruction on the ways of the world, but it's in the fear of the Lord. It's to benefit not only their bodies, to feed their bodies, but it's to benefit their souls, to feed their souls. Parents have that responsibility, not the schools, not your Sunday school teachers, not those people that you want to just, abdicate your responsibility to.
Director of Education.
Not the director of education. He is not responsible for your children's impression that they're supposed to receive of the commandments of God.
But it's interesting. So I was a youth pastor before, and I've shared this story a couple different times, but I was meeting with a parent once, and he asked me, or no, we were just having a conversation. He was kind of upset about the things that are happening in the broader ministry. And he said, if I knew how to teach them, why would I send them to you? And I really thought about it. And that, I still remember that to this day, because I was thinking, here you are as a father of 2 kids, middle school, high school, and you're telling me that you can't teach your kids, and that's why you send them to me, a second-year seminary student. And I was just, it was a sad moment, because I think parents don't really see that, because like you said, I think people are so focused on preparing and equipping their kids for worldly success, to go to a good college, to get a good job, to set themselves up financially, and they neglect the spiritual things. And I think one of the fears that I've heard of a lot of parents having is well, if I impress too much, if I force Christianity too much on them, then they're going to only just rebel and neglect it. And the more you push something, the more they're gonna, I guess, be repulsed by it. And so I've even heard of parents that are nervous about, teaching their kids the word and teaching their kids how to be a Christian, because they want them to want to do it. They want them to have Christian friends. And then because of that conversation and because of a retreat or whatever it may be, then they want to learn about God. And that's how they grow naturally. And they just pray for them, but they don't actually do the teaching themselves because they're scared.
Yeah. I saw this meme on Twitter or X where they would say, tell me your most controversial, take. And this guy, he had like maybe 70,000 likes on it.
Wow. A lot.
I forget how many impressions he had, but yeah, like 70,000 likes. But his take was parents are not qualified to teach their children. That's what his take was. And I don't necessarily disagree. Some parents may not know how to solve for the square root of 2. Do you know how to solve for the square root of 2? How are you going to teach your kid?
Like me personally?
Yeah. So when I was a kid,
take me a while.
I would have to reduce this equation in elementary school, and I reduced it.
When you were in elementary school, square root of 2?
Yeah, I was in tag. It's something. I don't know if you know tag.
Talented and gifted.
Yeah. I was in tag, and so I would reduce that and went to my dad. Here's my work, and he goes, "That's not it." So he started reducing the square root of 2. He started calculating right in front of me, 1.414, and he kept on going. He's like, "You don't even know this?" I was like, "What? Who knows this?" Anyway, some people you think you have to be like that. So can you do that? That's the whole argument that this person is probably bringing is, you are not qualified to teach your kid. Guess what? A teacher can probably do that. Can you do that? And if you can't do that, what makes you think that you could teach your kid? Shouldn't you then abdicate some of that responsibility, or, like the word like we like to use, delegate some of that responsibility to an outside source?
Oh, you're asking me. I think that's a tough question.
Yeah, I ask it because it is a tough question. I used to tutor this kid once, and the parent came to me and said, "Could you please spend some extra time with him?" And I said, "I don't think spending extra time with him is going to do anything." And they said, "He just needs to learn how to study." And I told them, I'll be very frank with you. If you really want him to study and you want to teach him how to study, whenever he brings home homework, sit down with him and do work alongside him. And have that time. And then the kid will know this is what it's like to study and focus. And you know what the response to me was? They said, "We did that when we were kids. We're not going to do that now." I check up on him every once in a while. He came to our retreat like a bunch of years ago too, just randomly popped in once. And this is like 10 years ago. But I check up on him. The dude never was able to do well in school, but, he was able to join the military, and, now, he can still get by. Obviously now he gets paid, whatever way he can, and he has jobs and things like that. But study, that was not his thing. You just couldn't sit down and read a book. Is that the life for everyone? Is that the life for everyone? So I'm not answering the question. I'm just posing you a different dimension. If you think that everyone needs to know how to solve for the square root of 2 to be a valid parent, I think the answer is no. But if you think that teaching a kid how to study is your job, the answer is yes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you are the teacher that teaches your kid how to study. You are the teacher that teaches your kid this is what worship looks like. Not exactly every doctrine of the faith is something that you need to be able to teach your child, but you need to know the basic tenets of the faith. You need to be able to know how to read the Bible. You need to be able to teach those things, and from then on, the kid can then sprout wings and really be able to take hold of his course or her course in life. I think that's the parent's job. If you think that you're going to teach the kid everything he or she needs to know, I think that's the problem. That's the problem. That's the hubris that then teachers have in our public education school systems, because they believe that they know everything that they need to know to teach your child at that stage in life. And with that kind of hubris, I hope they never teach anybody, to be honest. And that, what we really want are people that are humble before the Lord, that will be able to teach kids how to study, how to learn, how to look at things, how to read. Like, those are the basic things that we need to teach. Not necessarily the answer to the square root of 2. That doesn't qualify you to be a math teacher. And so that's hopefully people will get that.
At the same time, to your point, I think in comparison to the parents that the Apostle Paul and Moses were writing to during that time, parents today have more resources than any of those parents combined. And so if a parent really did want to teach their kid the Bible, if a parent really did want to teach their kid theological riches, they are able to, because they have the resources to be able to do that. And so I think on the other hand of that, I think parents can be led to laziness, thinking, well, I can't teach them everything. I'm just going to teach them, just this. God is good all the time. Boom, done. But no, but you have resources in which you can do all this extra study and you can teach your kids. And I get it that not everyone has time, but I'm saying the resources are there.
This is what all of our forefathers believed, not just Calvin, but Luther and the people that understood what godly parenting was. The responsibility that a parent has to their child in their education and their upbringing is not just a secular or societal responsibility. It is a vocational charge. That means, and this is what Calvin uses specifically, he uses the words sacred charge. It is a holy calling that you have been given. And what we all understand is that a child is not yours, but they are gifts from God. God has entrusted these children to you so that you would raise them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, because they are ultimately the Lord's. And this is what we believe. That's why we baptize the kids and things like that. And so this is what we solemnly believe, because we firmly believe this. We understand that our children have been given to us. They're gifts, they are blessings, absolutely.
Yep.
They are for our good, our benefit and all that, but they are ultimately God's. And we want to give them everything that they need, that God has entrusted us with. And so this is a sacred charge that God has given us himself for us to do. So we need to prepare their lives for service to God.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
And so if that's the charge that you've been given, you need to take that responsibility so incredibly seriously that you wouldn't just drop them off and not think like, oh, whatever, I trust Sam. He's a good guy. I'm sure he's teaching them about the faith.
That's right.
And that's good. See, that's not how anybody who understood the vocation would respond.
Yep. And the reason why I bring that is I think the temptation for most parents, if we were to consider both extremes of I have to teach them everything versus just falling into laziness, I think the temptation is to fall into laziness. And that's what I've seen in the past. And so that's why I wanted to bring that up too. as parents, we tend to get lazy to teach our children the truths of God's word, and we try to do the bare minimum, and if that.
We'll take the flip side of that. What's the first commandment to society of the 10 commandments? Isn't it the 5th commandment?
Honor your father and mother.
Honor your father and mother. It's the first commandment that comes with a promise,
Yep.
so that you may live long in the land, right?
Yep.
And let's go to Psalm 78, verses 5 to 6. I know we've been referencing broadly like the Shema and things like that, but we should say the Shema is from Deuteronomy chapter 6.
Yep. Psalm 78 verses
5 to 6.
5 to 6 reads, He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach to their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children.
The first person to see that children see as ministers of God are their parents. This is
Yep.
what Calvin also would write. The first ministers of God that the children bear witness to are the parents. And if the parents don't have the truth of God, then they can't witness, they can't minister. But if you are a Christian, then you have the truth of God in you. You have the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
That means you have to do this. And that means if you neglect this duty of raising your children in the Lord, you are committing a grievous sin.
Yep.
The reason why it didn't sit with you is if you understood Psalm 78 verses 5 through 6 and all these previous verses that we talked about, then you would be able to say to this parent who would have said that to you, is by neglecting your primary duty to this child as a minister of God, this is a grievous sin. And the church and any kind of subsequent education, public schooling, whatever, school, they can aid in this. But the primary responsibility of understanding that you are part of this covenant community that God has placed, because God always chooses his people and their children as his covenant partners, that's on the parent, right?
Yeah.
We don't trust it to kids, and we don't let kids run amok and saying, you get to choose your God.
Nope.
We tell the kid, this is your God. We're going to put the sign of the covenant on you. That's why we baptize the kid. That's why like people like Calvin were so upset at these Anabaptists. He wrote a whole chapter on his institutes on infant baptism because, well, a whole section on it. Was it 24, 25? I forget exactly which one. But he wrote a whole section on it because it was such an incredulous thing to think that a kid should be able to just pick on their own when they're adults. That's not what happens. You teach your kids and you impress upon them who the Lord God is. You instill the fear of the Lord in them, and you nurture them, and you give them the admonition that the Lord requires of you as a parent, because this is your sacred calling. If you understand that, then you understand that when God chose you, he didn't just choose you yourself. He chose you and your family, and all of them belong to God. They are under your care and responsibility. As the leader of the household, you take your entire family. The crazy thing to me is, if you think that by you become a Christian, you're just going to walk this path of faith to God alone, and you're going to take no one along with you, and you're responsible for no one else except yourself. To me, that's a crazy thing. If you have people under your care, let's say a war zone hits you, and this is what happened to my grandpa, and this is now my paternal grandpa. I think I mentioned this before, but when you get old, you kind of tell the stories again and again. But did I tell you he used to wake up in the middle of the night, like gasping for air?
No.
Well, he used to wake up in the middle of the night gasping for air. And that's because he would have dreams of him in the past. So, during the Korean War, there would be air sirens because there would be air raids. And if there are air raids or an invasion that's about to incur, he would just have to get up right then and there, pack up his kids and just run.
Yeah.
And run south, right? He would just have to run. So he still remembers it. even as an old, like 80-year-old man, he would remember it and he would gasp because that's what he was really concerned about. I need to take my family. I need to run south. When you're thinking about salvation, what is more dire? What's more scary? The physical death that you might have to go through here, or the spiritual death that will last for all eternity? If you are a father and you know that you have to take care of your kids are in your care. You are responsible for them. This especially then should go for salvation. Salvation is not just a toss-up. Maybe I hope my kid believes. No. You impress upon your kid because it is a life and death situation. You don't wake up when the air sirens hit and you don't ask your kid, hey, you want to go down south with me because you might die?
What do you want to do?
You pick them up. You pick them up and you run as fast as you can because you don't want them to die, because they are your responsibility. You love them. This is a sacred charge that you've been given over their physical body. And I'm telling you, over their spiritual body, you have a greater responsibility. It's even a more sacred duty to make sure that they understand who God is and that salvation is in our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
If that is your primary responsibility as a parent, and you brought up Calvin's quote about how we don't just teach on the gospel, but we also interact with them in every single way. And recently I was at a school tour, and I remember looking into the classrooms, and this principal was giving me this tour, and I said, "Oh, that's where the kids learn." And the principal said, "Oh, actually, no, kids learn everywhere." And I thought, I am a fool. That's true. Kids learn everywhere. In the hallways, on the bus ride, at home. Kids learn everywhere. And so not only are you responsible for the teaching of doctrine and the word, but in every single aspect. And that's why Deuteronomy 6, in everything you do when you're waking or you're sleeping, whenever you rise, whether you walk the way, you're supposed to be teaching your children. And so if that is our primary responsibility, what does that look like? So for someone that's in 2025 in America, we're in the Northeast, life can seem very, very set. Like, this is what you do. Monday through Friday, you go to work, you come home, you have dinner, put your kids to sleep. That's it. Saturday, you go to morning prayer maybe. Maybe you do sports. Sunday, you go to church. Boom. That's the schedule. That's what you do. What does a godly parent schedule look like? Like, how do we apply what we just talked about? How do we apply that?
Yeah, I think I went over some of the stuff that Calvin said, and I didn't really go over, let's say the roles of the mothers, but I really went into the fathers. Which I was kind of directing at you. Because you just
as
had,
in like the
as
like
a
second
newborn father.
Oh,
right,
you.
Nathan's dad, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But because we have been given a special authority, you have to be able to at least, I think in the very least, know where you're sending your kids. You need to know, are you throwing them into the lion's den? And you'll be like, well, God will take care of them. Like, to me, that would be a very, very foolish thing.
What about, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I guess I did, though.
Go ahead.
What about the idea of, well, I want my kids to be the light in the darkness?
Yeah. I heard that from a teacher. Her name was Jen Wilkin. And I think she was doing an interview on like TGC or something like that. And it was such a disappointment for me to hear. No. You don't send kids to go into battle. You go into battle for your kids.
Yep.
Sending your kids to battle may be the more insane kind of concepts that I've heard. There's a reason why in our society we say the men go to battle to protect the women and children. Because if we send the women and children to battle, the men have nothing to fight for and society is just going to crumble anyway. But the men go into battle to protect the women and children. That's why the fathers play such a pivotal role. I would even go as far as to say a sacerdotal role. That's what a father plays in the home. And, obviously I'm taking it a step further from even Calvin when he called the family the little church. But
yeah.
if you are the priest of your home and you protect your flock because you are the shepherd then of the home. And if you do not protect your flock and be like, this, I want to make sure this ewe has enough,
EWE.
yeah, has enough, I don't know, tough skin to go up against the wolf. So I'm going to send him against the wolf.
That's tough.
That is a rough one for me to think. So for me to have heard that, especially from, let's say, a site that wants to teach, Christian ideals and worldview and things like that, that was a big disappointment for me. So you could see why I would vehemently disagree with someone or anyone who would think that we send our kids to public school so that they could be a salt and light in a dark place. No. You lead your family. You protect your children. And if they happen to be a salt and light under your care because you're right there, that's one thing. But if you're sending them and you have no idea what's going on, that's another. So I would think then that you should know exactly what environment you are sending your kids to. I don't think that people do. That's my point. I don't think parents know what the classroom looks like, what is being taught. There is no place, no public school teacher wants cameras in their room. So they'll fight it. But if we had cameras in the public school classrooms, it would be chaos. It would be mayhem. You know why? Because every parent would be like, what is this? I don't like this. What is this? I don't like this. What is this? I don't like this.
Yep.
Because parents would be like, I can't watch this and let this go.
Yeah.
That's why teachers don't want it. That's why no public school teacher would want a camera in the room, because you'd have 50 parents coming up to you and be like, you can't do this. I don't want you to do this. I want you to do this better. Because once parents see it, they're not gonna stand by it. But parents almost willingly want to ignore what is going on in the classroom. And so when you have a teacher with, let's say, a pride flag right in the middle of their classroom, you know what, parents, even if they know, they're like, it's not they don't teach that all the time. Man, I don't care. I don't care if they don't teach it all the time. It's like, let's just saying, you know what? A wolf doesn't always eat sheep. It's like, yeah, okay. So what?
Sometimes it eats chicken.
Sometimes, yeah. What is wrong with that? Like, I would say, what's wrong with you, man?
I think in addition to that, there's another idea of, well, we live in a conservative town. We live in a conservative part of the world. We live in a conservative part of the country. But the truth is, you're delegating your responsibility to this other individual. Do you know this individual? Do you trust this individual? Sure, we have gone to a PTA meeting.
Yeah, you talk to him for like 10 minutes and then you're like, oh, this is a good teacher. You don't know, man.
Yeah.
You don't know. And so without constant, let's say, back and forth, a monitoring, a review, how would you know? Oh, you mean the PTA thing that you do once every 6 months? That's what's going to get you good? And you wonder why so many of these like teachers are like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs in what they're teaching.
Yeah.
How can you wonder why? You don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
You don't know where they went to school. You don't know their core foundational beliefs. And so you're just really rolling the dice and like, I hope I get lucky.
Yeah.
No, I hope I get lucky.
What it is. Yeah.
And I get someone like, your wife or mine,
Right.
That happens to be Christian. Like, no, man, you're really rolling the dice on this one. And that's with your kids.
Yep.
That's with your kids. You're rolling the dice. To me, that is not acceptable.
Yeah.
And so people have always pushed back and said, well, we'll see what happens when your kid has to go to schools. And I would always say, yeah, we'll see. And then what? It didn't change anything for your kid.
Right.
The point is, for your kid, it didn't change anything. And now you're up in arms because your kid went through this whole hoopla and they're not even Christian when they go to college. You think just college changed them? All of a sudden, they're like, you know what? Let me just change everything that I've learned for the past 18 years. Or do you think that they've been indoctrinated or impressed by some other factors while they were growing up that left such a deep impression that they were able to leave the faith so easily, like the first year of their undergraduate studies.
Yep. A parent, when I was serving before, asked me when I was leaving this church that I was serving at, asked me, can you find out why so many kids are leaving the church once they go to college? Can you please find out, and can you come back? And that stayed with me. I should have said, yeah, I actually found out what it was, and it was you. I should have said that.
Yeah.
But I didn't. Because I wouldn't say that. I don't think, to their face. But it's parents are neglecting their duty. But to push back on what you said though, Pastor Eugene, you brought up my wife, you brought up your wife. They're public school teachers. If you're leading your family, how are you okay with, your wife, your staff member's wife teaching in public school if educating them in a Christian environment is so important?
That may not be for long because the shift has happened so quickly and so fast. Maybe people might push back and say, no, it had been happening. You just had your eyes closed. And I'll take that criticism gladly, and I'll definitely reflect on that. But, in the end, I think people like us who grew up in the Asian community, when we were growing up, we had such stress and focus put on us to succeed in the public school environment. And so Martin Luther talks about this where he warns fathers, if you are so concerned about your child's worldly gain and not about, their spiritual life, then don't be surprised. I think, I'm obviously paraphrasing because I don't have the quote in front of me, but in the end, when you send your kid to public school, it is for worldly gain.
Yeah.
And that's actually what people are hoping for. It's like they succeed in the world. I found it. It's from Luther's Works. I wrote some of these down. Volume 46, and I'm just going to quote from Luther. A father who sends his child to school only for worldly gain and neglects their knowledge of God fails in his calling. It is the father's duty to ensure his children learn the word of God, for without it, they are lost. Let every father be a teacher of the gospel to his household, or he will answer to God for it. And so, you would think that these great reformers and the people of the past would have nothing to say about parenting. They had a ton to say about parenting.
Yeah.
Because parents are our first teachers, and especially that means they are first teachers of God. And so parents have this grave and heavy responsibility on them. And I hope that parents see that. And then when we neglect it or delegate it, quote unquote, delegate it to someone else, you better understand that the responsibility still falls on you and that you are ultimately responsible. If your kid falls away from the faith or something like that, you don't think that's on you? At all for the upbringing? So David had no responsibility for his children when Amnon raped his daughter Tamar and Absalom then went and killed and murdered Amnon?
Yeah.
Like he had no responsibility? Or did he have responsibility? And did he have to repent before the Lord? And Psalm 51 would come out and things of that nature. Like we have to wake up in our society. I think whether we think that this was a long time coming or this happened quickly, it matters not because it has happened. And we need to start to prepare well for what is to come. This is why I'm saying like Christian education, homeschool, this is a response in what's been happening.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so if you're going to respond, you have to respond well and you need to respond thoroughly and you need to respond quickly. You can't be too late. Even though it may be late in the hour, hopefully it's not too late, right? For our kids to grow up. There are cases where, up in Washington, was it, where a parent was called into the guidance counselor's office and said, your kid is trans. He's been like transitioning for the last 2 months, and the dad just said, okay. So you're not going to do anything. You're gonna support his transition? Is like, absolutely, yeah, or her transition, right? And then he goes, yeah, I'll do whatever I can. And then as soon as he got out of the school meeting, he packed up his bags and then moved out of the state. Like you have to be prepared to do something if something like that happens, because your responsibility is for your child. That's your sacred calling.
And in addition to what you had previously said about our wives working in public school settings, this is something that I've actually been thinking about for a while. I think there is a difference between an adult going into a secular world setting to be a salt and light there versus a child going in to absorb a worldview. I think there is a huge distinction. And so that has to be made. Our wives working in the public school system is not equal to us sending our kids to a public school system. I think that's very, very, I think it's clear, but I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I'm not saying make everything cushy or easy for your kid. It depends on what stage in life they are, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to send your newborn out there into the elements of the world, even physically, let alone spiritually. So when you prepare your kid, that's one thing. So, to give the benefit of the doubt, maybe this person that thinks that they should send their kid to be a salt and light in the world homeschooled their kid until they were in high school.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's the case. And in high school, they can go in and do the best they can. So that would be giving the benefit of the doubt on that argument there. I hope so. I mean, I hope they're not thinking from the kindergarten I can send them and then, just drop them off every day and then come back and be like, I hope they turn out good. I hope that's not what they're thinking. And so, I mean, that's one thing. But if you are, making sure that this kid will be able to thrive both physically and spiritually, you should be aware of what's in their environment as long as they're under your care, right? So you should know what their environment consists of. And so if you send them to a park, you should know if there are some like nails on the ground or there's something with asbestos or something worse in the park. And if you know that there's something bad, you're not going to be like, his immune system will take care of it. That's not what parents think. So the parents are going to be like, no, this kid is not ready to handle asbestos. I don't think he ever will be. I'm going to take him out of the park. And so you take him out of the park if you know there's asbestos in there. And so to not know, I think, is the bigger problem. To not understand what's going on in schools is a bigger problem. When you go to a school board meeting or a town hall and you understand that they're going to teach certain things in the school and you still send your kid to that school, I am telling you, you are responsible.
Yep.
You are responsible for that because you knew that and you still sent them to that school.
Yep.
That's a tough one. Why? Maybe you're right. Maybe they're lazy. Or I would think maybe a lot of these parents are like immigrant parents. They still have that immigrant mentality. Or you really are an immigrant and you don't feel like you have much choice. That's what I think. I think a lot of parents feel like there is no other choice because it's not like one of us can stop working and teach our kid full time. That can't happen. So if there are other options for them, we can make that known. And so one of the things that, you and I have been really working on is maybe we can offer other options for these parents.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, even, I know we're kind of nearing our time, but you reminded me just now, even as I was listening today to, there's a podcast that I listened to called Morning Wire, and it does kind of like a brief recap of all the news that's been going on the previous day. There's a court case right now in the Supreme Court where I believe it was a state. They're no longer making certain things optional. I know one of the arguments that people will make was, well, if our school system teaches LGBTQ or liberal things, we'll just opt out. There are places in the U.S. now where that's no longer the case, where opting out in the school's perspective is a lot of work. Is a lot of extra work that they have to do, and so they don't even offer that option anymore. And so we are coming to a place where it's not, hey, maybe you don't do this, or maybe you opt out of this one. It's becoming a whole worldview teaching on an ideology that's anti-biblical. Just wanted to bring that up too. And as we go into the latter portion of our podcast, I wanted to just end with this text. It's one of my favorite texts in the Bible. And this is after the Israelites cross over the Jordan, and God instructs Joshua to set up 12 stones to remember what God had done. And this is Joshua chapter 4, verse 20 and 24. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, when your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know. Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground, for the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. And so that's the parent's role, right? Like Calvin said, it is to teach the word of God, to teach doctrine, and also in every single interaction that we have to teach that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that they would fear the Lord forever. So I hope it's a good reminder this morning.
Yeah, we didn't really get into specifics on what to teach, when to teach, how to teach. Maybe we could save that for another episode.
I think so. I think this took a direction that I really loved.
Can I leave you with a teaser on some of the details that we could go into?
Little appetizer.
Yeah, let's do Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. Because I guess we prepared a lot. It's just we didn't go into all of we couldn't go into all of it.
Oh, I wanted to talk about this.
Just a teaser then.
This is Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1 to 4. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Anger.
Don't provoke your kids to anger.
Yep.
And I think, especially for fathers, this may be true. As a father, I think you understand this, but there are times that you can be exasperated, run out of patience.
Oh, yeah.
And your wrath overtakes you, and then you take it out on your kid.
Yeah.
The kid cries in the middle of the night, so you just wake up and you spank
this is
the
a
kid.
teaser, though. I don't think we can share this.
Kid wakes up in the middle of the night too much, so you're like, that's it, and you just spank the kid. But yeah. But
has to rattle the cage
what the apostle is showing us here is that fathers have a particular role. Mothers have a particular role, but fathers have a particular role. And he specifically addresses the fathers to teach their kids with gentleness and not tyrannically, not authoritarian like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Authoritative, not authoritarian, right? And so this takes a lot of energy. You cannot be lazy if you're a father and teaching up your kids, because it's easy to just neglect this part and then in exasperation provoke your kids to anger. Because what they see in you is what they will see in the religion you believe.
Yeah.
So they'll, in a sense, see Jesus in you. And so the way a father should teach their kid is the way Jesus has dealt with you. How patient has he been with you? And if he did admonish you and he disciplined you, what did that look like? All those things. So, appetizer, so I'll go a little general, right?
And you gave a lot. You gave that's like 2 bites of the entree too. That was a lot.
So when fathers instruct their kids, you are showing your kids who Jesus is like.
Yep. And we have to stop right there because that's the appetizer.
Okay.
To be continued, TBC. We're going to go into a quick current, it's not quick. We're going to go into a current event portion of our episode. On April 21st, Pope Francis, the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, passed away. He was 88 years old. And I think with the passing of the Pope, a lot of questions come up. I guess first, looking at this from a Christian worldview, how do we view this death? Now, I think there are a couple of different ways of thinking about it. I think there's a couple of different reactions that people may have. On one end, people that think that the Roman Catholic Church is the Antichrist or completely evil may be happy even, perhaps, that such a liberal Pope has passed. On the other hand, there are those that believe that there are brothers in the Roman Catholic Church, brothers and sisters in the Roman Catholic Church, rather. And with that, there is some sort of grieving, some sort of sadness at the passing of a religious leader. Other people don't know the difference between Roman Catholicism and Protestant faith, the Protestant Reformed faith. And so I guess the question is, as a Christian, how do we view this current event happening? And also, how do we view the Roman Catholic Church? And, recently, Pastor David Filson came, and he talked about the fact that there are brothers and sisters in the Roman Catholic Church. And I guess that kind of leads you down this path of thinking, well, how can this be if the gospel is so tainted within their church with their tradition? Is it even possible that the Pope was saved?
Is it possible?
I guess anything is possible. But,
yeah, if he gave his life to Christ, it's possible.
But it would be what? So I guess the question is, how much can you compromise? And that's a terrible question. But if you really believe that Christ is the Messiah and you place your faith in him and your fruit doesn't really look like that, like how much of that goes into the factor of salvation, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know if the Pope is in heaven or not, but like in the end, some of the things that he said was good. Some of the things that he said was bad. Obviously, people are more complicated than we would probably fully understand. And with his death, I think people are just really looking forward to seeing who's going to take up the mantle now as the new papal authority in the Roman Catholic Church. I would always hope that it's someone that would adhere more to scriptures, but in the end, it's not up to me. I don't pick the Pope, so it's not like I have a say in it. I could just hope. But as far as we're concerned, some of the basic stuff that we've been saying is true. You can't adhere to all of the tenets of the Roman Catholic faith and be a Christian. You just can't. But you can not adhere to everything, still be a Roman Catholic, and have, faith and belief in Jesus Christ. Like I said, you don't need to understand every single doctrine of the Christian faith to obtain salvation. What you need to do is understand the core of the gospel, and that is, as a sinner, you need Jesus Christ. If you place your faith in him, you are saved.
To what extent, though? And the reason why I ask that is because the foundational tenet of the Roman Catholic faith is you're saved by Christ, but also through tradition, in the sense of through penance, through all these different acts of faith that you do. And so at what point can we say, hey, at this point, maybe you're not saved? Like how much work is okay? You know what I mean?
If your salvation, if you believe that your salvation rests on, let's say, your laurels or the penance that you've done in life, then that is not a security that you can have.
Yeah.
And so that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, your absolute security has to be in Christ alone. And I get it that some Catholics, still want to do penance, and they think that, this is the true church. So you can disagree with some of the things. It gets complicated, I guess, for some people. But that's why the Reformation was there. And that people like Martin Luther didn't want to leave the Roman Catholic Church. But in fact, it was after Martin Luther, they solidified it with that synod. What is Synod of Dort? Council of Trent, right? Council of Trent. And so that's where they solidified, all these things which the Reformation was against. And, we have all these people always pushing up against that, like the Remonstrants and things like that. Against Tulip.
Yeah.
Well, Tulip was really clarified after the Remonstrance, right?
Right.
And so those are things that always seem to happen. The doctrine doesn't save you, but it gives you peace. Like, that's why we want right doctrine. It gives us a peace and assurance that we are saved because this is what we see in the Word of God. Can you be saved? Sure, because the core of the gospel is you believe in, the one true Savior, Jesus Christ. That's the core. So that's what we want to make sure that everyone understands. And from that, we see fruit come out if you truly have faith, and that by that fruit we can do some of that, discernment. That's all.
So you were probably saved if you're a bad Roman Catholic. So the reason why I asked that is because I think those who are in the Protestant church and those who are in the Roman Catholic Church, even when they misunderstand or don't know all of doctrine, they're in a different place. So, for example, even those who are in Protestant churches don't know all the doctrines. They don't know every single thing about the Reformed faith and stuff like that. But they believe that Christ is the only way. And to be fair, there are even times where Reformed Christians lean Arminian in the sense that they lean towards work-based. They have work-based tendencies, let's say, and they have to keep on cycling back to the gospel, continue to preach the gospel to themselves so that they continue to grow in their sanctification. Now, on the other hand, Roman Catholics who may have an understanding of the gospel, they're in a different place because although both parties may not know fully well all the doctrines of their faith, the Roman Catholic Church's goal is different from the Protestant Church's goal in the sense that within the Roman Catholic Church, to be a good Roman Catholic, you have to do these works. You have to follow this tradition.
Yeah, I mean, even in the Roman Catholic Church, this is my understanding, there are lots of branches, there are lots of understandings. They might not be, formally separated by denominational separations, but there are some informal separations doctrinally, which is what like the Pope kind of adjusts by picking out new cardinals and stuff later on. But, in the end, I can't really say that this is exactly what it is when it comes to certain doctrines, but I can say things like, generally speaking or broadly speaking, the veneration of Mary is not something Protestants really adhere to. We don't like that stuff.
It's not very chill.
Yeah, and so we don't worship Mary. Of course, they won't say worship; they'll say veneration. But we don't have statues of Mary up and things like that.
No.
And then we think it's odd to sing songs to Mary or pray to Mary because the dead can't hear our prayers. And so, those are things that we will say. And then obviously there's been pushback like she's not dead, she's next to Jesus. And it's like, no.
You don't know that. Like, she might be walking around. Like, we don't know where she is, like, in heaven.
I would say no. It's in the last day that Jesus Christ will raise up the bodies.
Right.
And right now, spiritually, I'm sure Mary is there.
Yeah.
But she's definitely not there to intercede on our behalf. We have one intercessor in Hebrews, and that's the high priest. That's Jesus Christ. So these are all additional stuff that tradition had brought in that Protestants, rightly so, I believe, don't adhere to. So there are some general things that we want to agree with the Roman Catholics, but I won't say all Roman Catholics necessarily venerate Mary. Does that make sense?
I think on the one hand, people might say like, oh, you got to make a statement, say something like you're saying, I don't know. On the other hand, people say, well, you're saying that all Roman Catholics are going to hell is kind of intense. And so I think what you said is extremely helpful. Because I can see people responding in both ways. Like, oh, you were too weak in your answer. You were too strong in your answer. But I think the answer was
the answer is yes. The answer is Jesus Christ is the only way.
Yep.
That's the answer. There's no other way, and there's no addition or subtraction from that.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And hopefully we can continue this conversation regarding parents and the role that parents have in the children's upbringing next week. We thank you for listening. Is there anything else? Like, is there something fun that I should be talking about? I feel like
you haven't really shared about Nathan, and people want to know. What are those sleepless nights?
So he's extremely heavy.
Look forward to.
When we went to the doctor a couple days after he was born, the doctor was shocked and had to check Nathan again because not only had he surpassed his birth weight, he had gained a couple ounces on top of that. So apparently, when babies are born, they lose weight immediately after they're born. And it takes them a couple weeks to get back to their birth weight. But within days, Nathan has gone past his birth weight.
What was his birth weight?
It was 7 pounds, 11 ounces. He's 8 pounds as of yesterday.
Nice.
So he said that we should stop feeding him formula.
Are you going to do that?
No, I haven't done that.
No, so you're still feeding him formula?
Yeah. I want a unit. I want a big boy. I should be like, that's a small boy talking. No, because we're doing a hybrid thing. But anyway,
Okay.
I don't want to tell you about
The secret to making a big boy.
like if this dude needs to play O-line for Nebraska or something. I don't know. He needs to do something like
to
that.
move to Nebraska then.
No. He'll just go to college there.
Okay.
But maybe not after our conversation today.
Yeah, you might have to move to Nebraska because you want to see his games.
Maybe he'll play at RBC. Maybe they'll have a team in 18 years. Anyway, we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight. Finish the race. Keep the faith. Peace.
Peace.